planned for the rest of the time that's up for the next few weeks. We're going to get started with our lesson today. We're going to be starting a new sermon series for the next few weeks, kind of centered around Christmas and the theme of Christmas and the wise men and those types of things. So I'm going to start off reading in Matthew chapter 2. We're going to read the first 12 verses, and it's probably pretty familiar to all of you guys because most of you probably read it right around Christmas time, either the Matthew or the Luke version of it. But Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, it says this. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" Makes you kind of wonder why the king at the time would wonder where the Messiah is supposed to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said, "for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people Israel." Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too." After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem, and went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in the dream not to return to Herod. And as I'm sure most of you guys know, Herod's intentions were not actually to worship Jesus. I think he ended up putting out a decree to kill all the babies that were like 2 years old and younger, just to make sure that the Messiah didn't stay alive, because he didn't like the idea of there being another king. And I think a lot of us can say that sometimes in our lives. We don't like the idea of somebody else ruling our own lives. So just like the wise men, there's a battle to the death between kings in our lives, and a lot of times it's between ourselves and God being king. One king must die for the other king to reign. And we don't know how many wise men there were or even where they came from, but we do know that the gifts that the wise men gave to the king, and we can learn from that. See, the Queen of Sheba, she had brought similar gifts to Solomon, right? We see in 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 9, it says, "When the Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's fame, she came to Jerusalem to test him with the hard questions. She arrived with a large group of attendants and a great caravan of camels loaded with spices, large quantities of gold, and precious jewels. When she met with Solomon, she talked with him about everything she had on her mind." And then in Matthew chapter 12, 42 is Matthew 12. This is later on in Matthew. It references when the Queen of Sheba came. "The Queen of Sheba will also stand up against this generation on judgment day and condemn it. For she came from a distant land to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Now someone greater than Solomon is here, but you refuse to listen." See, gold at the time, back in the olden days, gold was the usual offering presented to kings by their subjects or those wanting to pay respect. And as long ago as 2500 BC, gold was especially prized and used as a medium of exchange. In both the Old Testament tabernacle and the temple, gold was used plentifully. So we see that gold is also associated with worship. And we are told that in the heavenly city, we will walk on streets of gold. I'm sure all of you guys have heard the illustration before, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you anyways. There was this guy, this really wealthy guy, had a lot of gold, had a lot of silver, all those different things. And when it was time for him to die and go to heaven, he wanted to take some of his possessions with him, and he got in an argument with God. And God was like, "No, you can't bring anything." He was like, "Come on, man, just let me bring a little bit." So he was like, "All right, I'm going to let you bring one suitcase." God was, "Okay, what am I going to bring?" So he finally figured out what he wanted to bring, his most prized possessions. He put it all in a suitcase. He got up to heaven. And at the pearly gates, they opened a suitcase to see what it was. And they were like, "Why are you bringing pavement?" It was gold. You get it? Yeah. See, today, gold is no longer used as a medium of exchange, though. I'm not sure how much gold the wise men left with Jesus, but today, that may be similar to maybe leaving a trust fund or a large sack of Benjamins, if you know what I mean. At Christmas time, thank you, thank you, large sack of Benjamins. At Christmas time, we celebrate the birth of Jesus and tell the story of his birth. We read about the gifts that the wise men left him, and we often say the 3 wise men, when in reality, we actually have no clue how many wise men there were. But over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about these 3 gifts that the wise men left, that the gifts they left for the king, and how even though we may not have those gifts specifically, we have what those gifts represent. And the first gift was gold, and gold represents what in our modern day? Money, all right? So today we will be talking about money. We will be talking about gold. But next week and the week after, we'll be talking about what frankincense represents, what myrrh represents. So make sure you come back over the next few weeks as well if you want to hear the rest of the series. So money is one of those easy things to talk about around Christmas, right? Because money just kind of seems to fly away around the Christmas season. I don't know about you guys, but every year, like, we have to save up. We usually save up quite a bit of money every year going into the Christmas season because we just know it's going to be gone. But I love Christmas. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I love all of the holiday lights. I love the decorations. I love the trees. I love the Christmas music. I love all of it. And yes, I may be one of those weird people, but I love the hustle and bustle of Christmas. When you're out, when you're shopping, when you see all the energy in the store. Now, I don't like waiting in lines. I don't like that part of it. I don't think anybody likes waiting in line. It's the waste of time that is. But I like the hustle and bustle. When you're in the store, you feel all the energy, the excitement. My wife and I went to the mall yesterday to pick out some outfits. We were doing a Christmas photo shoot. And it was just so many people walking around. They had the Christmas tree in there. It was a giant Christmas tree in the mall. It's just exciting. It's so much energy, right? I know I'm not the only one, but if we're not careful, we can get kind of caught up in all of that. I know I can. So let me ask you this question. How many of you are still thrilled about that Christmas gift that you got last year? How many of you even remember what the Christmas gift you got last year was? Probably not most of us. I don't remember what I got last year. But it's amazing how there's all this pressure on us to get these great gifts for other people every year. But the thrill of the moment doesn't last beyond a couple of weeks. If we're lucky, it even lasts that long. We have ads on the radio, ads on YouTube, ads on Facebook. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to get a bit scared of my phone. There's like ads popping up on my phone of things that I think about. I know my wife mentioned that the other day. She was like, well, I haven't even talked about this. Why is this popping up on my phone? And it's like, every time we talk about something, it's going to pop up on Facebook. You're going to get an ad for it. Anybody else notice that these days? Yeah, it's crazy how that works. So, everywhere we look, there are advertisements putting more and more pressure on us to find the perfect gift. Mall madness. I said I went to the mall yesterday. Mall madness sets in. Should be an actual medical condition. It discourages the idea of contentment. But not as many people go to the mall anymore, so let's call it Amazon madness now, right? Cyber madness. Let's call it Google, Amazon, Walmart.com, whatever. Wherever it is that you go shopping, that's the madness that we're dealing with nowadays. People are continually bombarded with the message, what you have isn't enough. You need more. A bigger house, a better car. How many people have seen the commercials online, on TV, online, on YouTube, whatever? Buy your spouse the perfect gift. Buy him or her the perfect gift this year. And it's like a $28,000 car. Anybody see that? Every time I see those, I'm like, who's got the money to like just buy a $28,000 car as a gift? Like that's a gift that keeps on paying for, right? that's not the gift that keeps on giving. That's the gift that keeps on taking. But you need more. A newer cell phone, right? A larger salary, whiter teeth. You probably see ads for that too. Like, they give them the gift of a smile, Fresher breath, nicer clothes. The list goes on and on. Materialism, it's the monster of more. One of the 10 commandments forbids coveting. That's an old word that we don't use much anymore because it's a word that, it's not necessarily a pretty word. We don't like to hear that word. But it simply means the uncontrolled desire to acquire. And how often do we deal with that, the uncontrolled desire to acquire? I remember seeing videos online of people during Black Friday, right? Anybody know where I'm going with this? They're fighting. People on Black Friday fighting in the malls, fighting in lines, like just going crazy, right? Anybody else see those videos when they were going viral? Yeah, I don't know how much it still happens these days because I try to avoid the Black Friday rush. But I think that is a definition of uncontrolled desire to acquire. I think we can all agree that's kind of insane, right? Fighting in the store over a brand new TV that you're probably only going to save $25 on. That's all reality. That's how it is these days. They mark everything up, and then you think you're getting a deal, and you're really not. Go back the next week, it's like, wasn't it just like $10 more last week? So that's crazy. But not many of us would probably get involved in a mall fight. So since we're probably not going to get involved in a mall fight or get involved in a Best Buy fight, let's talk about something that maybe we might get involved in that can represent an uncontrolled desire to acquire. And that would be maxing out a credit card, right? Or spending more than we're able to, spending more than we have to, spending more, and then that bill comes in January where it's like, oh man, I got to deal with this now, right? How many people can say that's happened to them before? You don't have to raise your hand. I'm sure it's happened to more people than want to share. See, I believe that also falls in that same line of uncontrolled desire to acquire. And I think if we're all being honest, at some point, we've all dealt with that. See, when we get to the place where we're not concerned with the consequences of purchasing, we may be in danger of coveting. In the 10 Commandments, the Hebrew word kamad in that commandment it means to desire something you were never meant to own, all right? So those people in the mall that were like fighting over the TV, they probably never meant to own that TV. But that's why the command specifies not to covet your neighbor's possessions. Just because someone else has it doesn't mean that you need it or that you have to have it. Jesus talked about becoming as a child if we want to belong to his kingdom. Have you ever noticed that we ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? Think about that. We never ask, what do you want to get? We always ask them, what do you want to be? But as we grow older, it's like somewhere in our mindset, something shifts, right? It's no longer what do we want to be as we're adults. It's what do we want to have? What do we have? What do we not have? You know, if you start thinking about your goals, a lot of times our goals are centered around, I want to have a house, I want to have a boat, I want to have this, I want to have that. Like, what do you want? And a lot of times it's not centered around who we are as people, right? We become less concerned with who we are than what we have. And that's why I believe we have so many adults that are having these existential crises, these midlife crises, these identity crises, right? I know there are other reasons for those things, but a lot of times it boils down to we don't care who we are anymore. We've been so focused on what we have and what we don't have that kind of defines who we are as a person. We forget to ask ourselves, what do I want to be? And that's why people end up going through all these crises. Now, these crises, this desire for more, this covetousness often makes us forget and forsake the things that are truly important to us and seek out things that don't matter in the long run. But I'm going to qualify this. I'm not addressing a natural desire and responsibility to provide a good life for you and your family. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to increase your station in life in order to provide a better life for your family. But what I'm addressing is this uncontrolled desire to acquire, right? What would you tell the little woman in Mark 12 who gave her last 2 coins at the offering in church? What would you tell the diligent businessman in Luke 12 who wants to expand his business so he can live comfortably in the future and retire early? Well, Jesus kind of said something about that. In Mark chapter 12, verses 43 and 44, it says, "And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in there of their abundance. But she of her want did cast in all that she had, even in all of her living." And then in Luke 12, verses 20 and 21, it says this, "But God said unto him," and this is talking about the guy that wants to expand his business, "Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then who shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God," right? So a lot of people read this scripture in Luke, the second one, and use it as a means to destroy trying to plan your life or trying to better your life or trying to increase your station in life. But that's simply not the case. That's not what that scripture is talking about. Because if you read it, it says, "Thou fool, this night your soul will be required of you. For who shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure in himself and not rich towards God." And what it's talking about is imbalance. I'm going to talk about kind of balance a little bit more in a minute. But the scripture is addressing the imbalance that covetousness can bring. The wealthy man wanted to expand his business and live a comfortable life. So he did so at the cost of his relationship with God. And I believe that it is difficult. This is a difficult balance for men to find, right? Because a lot of times we feel on ourselves a burden, a pressure to provide for our families, a pressure to increase, to get better, to do more, right? I remember reading this article recently. It was about, I think it was a hospice worker who had sat. If you guys are familiar with hospice, a lot of times they're sitting on deathbeds with people. And when this hospice worker said that he worked with a lot of successful people on their deathbeds, and he said like over 95% of them, their number one regret in life was not spending more time with their wife and kids. It wasn't about having more money. It wasn't about wishing he would have got a bigger house. It wasn't about wishing that they would have had a boat or done more stuff away from the family. It's always relationship centered. I wish I would have spent more time with my wife, my kids, my family, my children. It's a balance that we have to find. And I know some women deal with it as well, but I think this is something that men deal with more often. So on one side, we have to make sure we're developing our relationship with God, our family, others, the things that are actually important to us. But on the other hand, we have this responsibility to provide. See, the Bible says a man that can't provide for his own house is worse than an infidel. So if God is telling us that we have to provide, and that if we don't provide, we're worse than an infidel, then he's certainly not telling us to not plan, to not set ourselves up for success in the future. He's certainly not telling us to do it, but it has to be done in balance. It has to be done with wisdom. When you're reading the Bible, when you're reading Scripture, you can't just take one thing and say, oh, that's what the Bible's talking about. You have to put it all into context, right? So yes, the Bible did say, Jesus did say, so is a man Like, what are you going to do with all these treasures? And you're going to leave behind. So you're rich towards yourself, but not towards God. But it also says we have to provide. So we have to take those two and find the balance in it. We had a series earlier this year about the stewardship, right? Stewardship of our time, our talent, our treasure. Does anybody remember that? If you don't remember, I believe most of those are on YouTube. On our YouTube page for New Life, just go online and look for our New Life YouTube page, and you can find most of those lessons if you want to re-listen to it. But this is the stewardship of treasure now, right? We're talking about, again, gold, money, stewardship of treasure. Remember the parable with the 3 servants who had 2 talents. 2 of those servants doubled their talents while the one hid it and sat on it. The master chastised the one who did not grow his talent and took away what he had, right? Again, there's this balance between growth and covetousness. Much of it is measurable by what we do with that growth. The thing is, none of us can enthrone the true King Jesus unless, in the process, we dethrone our other kings. If Christ is not Lord over our money and our possessions, then he is not our Lord, period. In Luke chapter 19, Jesus gauged Zacchaeus' spiritual condition by his willingness to part with his money. But in Matthew 19, he gauged the rich young ruler's spiritual condition by his unwillingness to do the same. There's an undeniable connection. So Jesus calls us to take action that breaks our bondage to money and possessions and frees us to live under his lordship. Our handling of money is a litmus test of our true character, as an individual, as families, as leaders, and as a church. Our stewardship of our money and possessions becomes the story of our lives, right? And that is true of people in all ages, but don't you think it would have a special application to those of us who live in a time and place of unparalleled affluence? Think about it. We live in a society enjoying comforts, conveniences. King Solomon could have only dreamed of the comforts and the conveniences that we have now, right? Of everything that in King Solomon's house, right? All the gold, all the silver, all the beauty, all those different things that he had adorning his house. Guess what he didn't have? Air conditioning. Right? He didn't have air conditioning. How many of you guys would like to have a house made of gold but no air conditioning? No. So, they had the valuable things, but think about what we have in our day and age, right? We can go on a Starbucks and there's air conditioning, right? Go sit in a Starbucks. So, we live in a country where the poverty level exceeds the average standard of living in nearly every other society in human history, past or present. So, what we do with our money tells a story of what we value. Are we willing to surrender it to God that he will provide, or do we keep it? Who loves to shop? A lot of people, maybe, some, not so much, right? It has become our most popular weekday out-of-home entertainment in North America. In North America, there are 16 and a half square feet of mall space for every man, woman, and child. That's crazy, right? And materialism continues to whisper, if you only had this thing or this person, you'd finally be happy, right? I was about to say, sorry, my mind, I was thinking maybe if I just had a PS5, if I just had a PS5. But then you know what? I wouldn't be happy if I got a PS5 because all my friends have PS4s, and I wouldn't be able to play with my friends on the PS5, right? So I would have to wait for them to catch up, and then I'd be all alone again. And see, look, it's what things we value, all right? It's a lie that blinds us, right? So the society keeps telling me, yeah, go get this PS5, but then I'm going to be alone with the PS5, right? So it's a lie, and it blinds us to the fact that we were made for only one purpose, and that's Jesus. In one place, that's heaven. Materialism is not just simply wrong, it's irresponsible. It's a bad investment of your time, it's a bad investment of your talents, and it's a bad investment of your treasure. Matthew chapter 16 and verse 26 says this, for what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? See, this is exactly why the Bible devotes twice as many verses to money. There's 2,350 verses devoted to money as to faith and prayer combined. Faith and prayer combined have 500 verses each that they talk about. But there's 2,350 verses that are talking about money. Why did Jesus say more about money than he did about heaven and hell combined? Why did the Savior spend 15% of his recorded words talking about money? Why are 1 out of every 10 verses in the Gospels about money? Why did Jesus devote 16 out of his 38 parables, that's almost half, on money? Why did he say more about money than any other subject? Because money and possessions have the greatest potential to replace the lordship of Jesus in our life. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24 says this, no man can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon is a biblical word for money. Matthew chapter 16 and verse 29 says, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart also be. Think about this, right? When you go to a foreign country, you do the foreign exchange currency, all those different things. And when you're coming home, you don't want to have a bunch of extra money left over, right? My wife and I went to Spain a couple years ago. Spain, we were in France, I think, for 2 days as well. And we have some of the Spanish money that we have left over, and it's been literally sitting on her vanity since we got there. It's useless. It's totally useless to us unless we go back to Spain, right? And it's kind of like that, like when we have our money, right? When we go to heaven, what's that money going to be? Now, if you have children, of course, leaving that money to your children, making sure that they're well taken care of, that's one thing. If I had family back in Spain, which I don't, I have some family in my grandma lives in Trinidad. But if I had family in Spain, then yeah, it'd be okay to have some of that money and leave it with them. But I'm not bringing it with me because it's not going to do me any good. So Luke chapter 16, verses 10 and 11 says this. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. Sorry, let me say that again with better cadence. He that is faithful in that which is the least is also faithful in that which is much. He that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. If therefore ye have not been faithful in the unrighteous money, who will commit to your trust the true riches? In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 and 10, it says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. I want to read that last part again, because we hear the first part of it a lot, but I want to kind of touch on it again. For the love of money is the root of all evil. And we hear that a lot. Which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. We always hear that the love of money is the root of all evil. But how often do we pay attention to that next part? It's the root of all evil because coveting it causes many to leave their faith, leaving them with sorrows upon sorrows. I'll be the first to tell you that I have goals and dreams. I have things that I want, right? I just mentioned the PS5, but that's not my goals and my dreams, right? I'll be the first to tell you that I love to be a billionaire. How many people would love to be a billionaire, right? In theory, you think that you would love to be a billionaire. And I think we all think that. We all want that, right? But at what cost? We all want to go out and earn money. We all want to make millions of dollars. That's something that we think about, right? But if it causes me to leave my faith, and if it causes me sorrow, then it wouldn't be worth it. How many families survive covetousness, all right? Look at a lot of these successful families, a lot of these people with millions and billions of dollars, right? Look at their marriages. Look at their relationships with their children. I think it kind of speaks for itself, right? A lot of the times that comes with a price. So there's nothing wrong with a natural desire to provide better for your family, to increase your station in life. But if it comes at the cost of your family, at the cost of your marriage, at the cost of your relationship with your kids, is it worth it? I don't think so. Anyways, moving on. So we teach about tithing, right? Everybody knows mostly about tithing. We teach that 10% is what the Bible teaches on tithing. And if you want to learn more about that, we have lessons on that. If you want to know more about tithing in general, if you have any questions about that, you can come talk to me afterwards, and I'll tell you a little bit about tithing. But in the Old Testament for Israel, there was actually not just one tithe for Israel, but there were 3 tithes for Israel. One tithe supported the priests and Levites. Another provided for the times of worship in the house of God. And the third tithe supported orphans, widows, and nephews. Orphans, widows, and the poor. This third tithe was collected only every third year. So this amounted to an average tithe of 23% per year. And that's just the Old Testament. See, tithing 10% was only a minimum standard. It was not a maximum goal, right? See, God's people don't give their tithe. They repay their tithe to God at his request. We operate under the belief that everything that we have is from God. He gives us, so we present back, right? This is why the Bible speaks of bringing, taking, presenting, paying. People are doing those things with their tithing. They're not giving their tithing. The Bible doesn't talk about giving their tithing. It talks about bringing, taking, presenting, or paying. And then the Bible emphasizes free will offerings, voluntary contributions beyond the tithe. Those constitute giving in Scripture. So giving is going above and beyond, which is tithing, going above and beyond tithing. Tithing is repaying God what is already his. A disciple doesn't ask, how much can I keep? but how much more can I give? Young believers will take their cues from our materialistic society unless mature believers pass on a vision for giving. And here's an important thing to note. Unless people give systematically, unless you give systematically, it's often rare that you're going to give substantially. When you give systematically, routinely, when you give on, like, have a system of giving, you will often be shocked at how much you actually gave, right? I remember sometimes at the end of our year, we'll look at our giving statement for the year, and I will be shocked at how much we actually gave throughout the entire year because we give our tithes every single month, and then we do like the gifts and everything, the additional offerings throughout the year, and it's shocking. But there have been times, like in the past, where you may not give as I may not have given as systematically as usual, and it's like, man, I really thought I gave more that year. Anybody ever had that? It's like I really thought I gave more. When you give systematically, you will often, again, be shocked at how much you gave at the end of the year. But the converse is true. If you don't give systematically, you will look at how much you gave at the end of the year and often think you gave more, right? So there are 3 levels of giving. There's less than our ability, which most Christians live at, which is you have a certain amount of money, so you give less than what you're able to give. We give according to our ability, which is kind of like, okay, I'm going to give. I have this to give. It's not going to hinder me, but it's also not going to be any extra. And then there's beyond our ability, which is less than 1%. And giving beyond our ability is giving when the numbers don't add up. Giving when the bottom line says we shouldn't. It's giving beyond our means, and it's giving despite risk. It's giving away our necessities and not just our luxuries. So I like to tell a story. I always like to tell a story of my dad, right? Anytime it comes to giving, I'm always going to tell the story. So you guys probably heard it like 5 or 10 times already, and I'm going to tell it anyways. I think when I was a little kid, I want to say I was like probably 2 at the time, and my older brother and sister were like 3 or 4. I was talking to my birth mom one time. She got mad. She was telling me about the story when I was a kid that my dad had to choose between paying his tithes or paying the light bill. Okay, it's that's a pretty real dilemma right there. Paying your tithes or paying the light bill. Natural thinking says go ahead and pay that light bill. My dad was like, you know what? I'm going to give to God. I'm going to give to God what is His. And I don't know if you guys know him now, but my mom got mad. She was mad at the time. She was like, how in the world are you going to pay the church and not pay the power bill? Like, we're going to lose electricity. And I think he said we ended up losing electricity for like a day, and they ended up being able to pay the bill, and it was fine. But if you guys know my dad now, he says that is the only time he's ever had to make a decision even close to that. He had to make it one time, and God blessed it, because God said, I can trust you with the money that I can give you, that I'm going to bless you with. And if you look at him now, he's a very successful person, right? I'm not going to give away his finances, but he's a very successful person. But at one point, he had to make a decision. What am I going to do with the money that God's trusted me with? Am I going to pay God what is His? Or am I going to go ahead and use it for what I think logically is right? And as long as we trust God with our treasure, as long as we trust in God, sometimes we may see in the moment that's not going to work out, but it'll always work out in the end. We could spend all day telling you stories. And I know we had a Giving Sunday this year where people were just giving testimony upon testimony upon testimony about times that they've given above and beyond when they didn't have to give, and how God has blessed them through it, how God has taken care of them through it. And we'll have another one of those services next year. But it's important. It's important to note we need to trust God with our money, with our treasure. Okay, so that means we give. But we don't want to just give our treasure, but our time and our talents as well, all right? Giving is not just about donating money. It's about conquering our covetousness. It's about conquering our desire to keep our money. It's about conquering the uncontrollable desire to acquire. So because when you're giving, you can't take at the same time, okay? So that's what giving is about, right? It's not about the church getting your money or anything like that. It's about you conquering that uncontrollable desire to acquire. Because how many people know when you have that $100 bill sitting in your pocket or that $50 bill sitting in your pocket, those are the ones that you want to hold on to for a long time, right? Anybody else like that? You get like a nice, crisp, clean $100 bill. I think if I don't get those very often, but when I do, I think that thing stays in my wallet for about 2 years because I just don't want to get rid of it. I don't want to get rid of that nice $100 bill, right? But when we see ourselves start getting into that system of, man, I want to hold on. At that point, we should probably open our hands a little bit more, because when we do release to God, what is He going to give back to us when our hands are open, right? So if you're a high-capacity person in any of these areas, time, talent, treasure, and you're not using those resources to give to God and you're holding on to it for yourself, at that point, you may need to start reconsidering where you are in life and what you're doing and what you can offer God. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 5 says this, "And this they did, not as we hope, first gave their own selves to the Lord and unto us by the will of God. So, to kind of bring everything full circle, right? As we enter into this Christmas season, or are already all in on the Christmas season, like I said, we got the tree up. Some of you guys may have all your Christmas lights up. We have all of our Christmas lights up. Remember to present your gift to the Lord. The wise men, they did it with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And next week, we're going to be talking about frankincense. But remember, as we're into this holiday season, don't let that uncontrolled desire to acquire get a hold of you. As you see all the cool, flashy things go on sale, when your phone keeps reading your mind and putting that item that you want in front of you, remember to be wise with your decisions. And finally, remember to keep the main thing the main thing. Pastor has mentioned it, and I'm sure you will hear it many, many times. And all the hustle and bustle of the holidays, remember, keep Jesus at the center of it. Okay? So come back in the next couple weeks. We'll be talking about frankincense and myrrh next week. And if you do have any questions, feel free to ask. If you want my notes, I'm happy to send them. All right, but we'll be back here in about 35, 40 minutes for the main service. It starts at 11:30, and I look forward to seeing you guys then.
Hallelujah. Come on with the continuing of your hands. Lift up your hands. Open up your mouth. God, we give you glory. We praise your name. Let praises rise from the inside of me. May you delight in the inside of me. Come fill my life from the inside of me. Say